Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, as you might have heard in our intro, and with me, as usual, is my expert panel, Marshall, Adam, and Daniel. How are you guys?
Great.
Doing very well.
Doing very, very well.
That's good to hear. So, before we begin, as for Spirit Live rules and regulations, the opinions expressed are not those of Ryerson or Ryerson faculty and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised. I want to say... do you know what today is?
What is today?
Today, you want to know what today is?
What is today?
Today is the Raben Report's 40th episode.
Hey.
Very nice.
Right? So, how does that make you guys feel?
Well, you know, it's been a wild ride. 40 episodes, 40 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's almost an entire year's worth of
Almost.
12 more weeks.
Well, yeah, 'cause I guess we've had weeks off. Sorry, I was confused for a second there, but yeah, we've had months off.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, well, it's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, I'm very happy for this because learning like new stuff like RTA stuff, even though it's very minimal stuff right here with learning how to with sound production and just learning how to do a radio show and stuff like that. It's very interesting, and obviously the best part is listening to everyone's opinions and talking about very important issues and voicing our concerns and just giving a voice to the people and stuff. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Adam?
Yeah, you know, it's you never know where things will lead when you send a message after a post in a politics group or different things like that. You never know where things will lead with any opportunity that you have. And when Elliot posted in our politics page, and he was like, "Hey, I'm looking for some panelists for this podcast I'm trying to run." And then I messaged him. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm down." And then here we are 40 episodes later. I got to know Marshall and Daniel, even though we had a lot of mutual friends, but I got to know them on a more personal level. I got to know Elliot, who I don't think I would have met had I not been here. So I think that the show has given me a lot. It's given me an exposure to opinions different than mine, which I didn't really have before university, really. And yeah, I love it. And I will never stop doing it so long as I'm on this campus.
And I'm glad to hear all that. Honestly, I just went on a whim and just kind of thought, let's see who's down to do this, because I felt that we need something where we can express our views civilly at school and just talk. And I'm glad that here we are 40 episodes later. So, there's 40 episodes. Just wait till episode 50. So let's start with our recap of the week. We're going to go through it real quick. But I want to mention again, because last week, unfortunately, our episode got cut short. So we're going to go through quickly the recap of last week and a couple things from this week. So Dana Lee, who was a professor at Ryerson, he passed away last week. Very influential. He's been here for a long time. He taught many of the labbies that are here now. Taught a lot of students. My year was the last year to actually have been taught by him, and he had so much passion and joy for what he did. So very sad that he's gone. And we had a little informal ceremony here at the RTA School of Media, the Rogers Communications Center, and then we're also going to have a celebration of life later on in the semester. The next thing, Daniel, if you want to mention really quick, is the Women's Empowerment Conference, which you went to. Just 30 seconds on it.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Obviously, we got cut off, unfortunately, due to last week. But last week on Tuesday, I went due to my professor, Peter McLeod. He helped organize with the Ontario government and with his public policy organization. He basically helped create the Women's Empowerment Summit. So it was a bunch of panelists and basically everyone there to talk with CEOs and important business people, and just basically about women and empowering women in these male-dominated workplaces, and trying to figure out a way to improve gender equality and stuff like that. So the main important thing that I wanted to talk about because of the summit was the Ontario government's announcement that was basically going to put a significant portion into gender-based violence and to protect women, and also was the legislation they're going to enact for companies over 250 that have over 250 employees. They need to be transparent about how they're paying, so they're going to force them to show all of their employees how much they're getting paid. That way, women can analyze that, and so they can fight for more equal pay and stuff like that.
Awesome. And so the next piece is Stephen Hawking died today.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah, it's
influential.
funny, I think Marshall mentioned it to me. Like it was like a midnight had happened or something like that, and it was like a lot of people were shocked. It's like it's just breaking news. Like,
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody who was always very influential despite not being a typical kind of celebrity. I think everybody knows who Stephen Hawking is. You know, as a little kid, one of the questions I think little kids always ask their parents is, who's the smartest person in the world? And I know that my parents always said Stephen Hawking, and that was always, so he was always like a huge deal, like, wow, smartest person in the world. And I would imagine that that's the answer a lot of parents give to their kids, and I think a lot of them may have felt the same way, as, you know, ever since you were a little kid, looked at this guy as some sort of person who was just this this glorious figure. And now I wouldn't have looked at him the same way these days. But as a kid, he's like this crazy, untouchable, like demigod, and it was, you know, impactful to see him go.
And pop culture really allowed for him to be even more well known. Like Big Bang Theory had him on several times.
The Simpsons,
Family
The
Guy.
Simpsons had him on a lot.
Like pop culture and
They adored
mainstream
him.
shows loved him and really wanted to to show how important he was, because otherwise he would have just been known in the science community.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are plenty of intelligent scientists, like we know them by name, Marie Curie, Albert Einstein, and there are definitely a few that are, you know, very close influence-wise to Stephen Hawking. But it's the fact of how Stephen Hawking overcame all his odds. He was given 2 years to live. He wrote a book when he was completely quadriplegic. He wrote several books, and he just never stopped. And, you know, he never stopped because his disease, his acute form of ALS, never affected his brain. His brain remained untouched, and he fought to get the information out of his brain into the world. And I think that reflects not only as a triumph for, you know, the disabled community and for you know, the science community, but also for the sort of the fight that mankind fights and will never stop and has never stopped. And he's a hero for me in a lot of ways. I will never be as smart as him. I don't understand 99% of the things that he says, but he was also like he made the world accept that he was more of a person than sort of this entity and this just sort of smart guy. He was very sarcastic. He was very funny, and he will be missed in this community.
I think one important thing that I remember was watching, I think John Oliver had him for a quick minute, I think. And he was like, he has that kind of condescending attitude too, like, but like, he doesn't. He knows he's smarter, but like, it's not that he's a dick. He's not a dick about it.
He's not like Neil deGrasse Tyson about it.
Fuck! I was gonna say that I actually like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh my god!
No, I know what you're talking about, Daniel.
Absolutely, just abrasive.
Because John Oliver was like, so Stephen Hawking, if you believe in parallel universes, that means there's a parallel universe that you're not funny, that you're not smart. And then Stephen Hawking goes, yeah, and there's also a parallel universe where you're actually funny, and then he smiles. So I think that we can all appreciate Stephen Hawking for his roasts and his science.
Very true.
Is there anything other breaking news?
No, I think let's just go to our main topic, because
no Doug Ford.
I guess Doug Ford has been elected the leader of the Conservative Party. A lot of people are unhappy about it. A lot of people are happy about it. What about you guys?
Well, I was a big Christine Elliott supporter. I worked on her campaign. I was really, really banking on her winning. I really thought that, you know, she was going to take it. I thought that she was the obvious choice. You know, this was a unconventional leadership race that was much less about ideas, because they all were running more or less on Patrick Brown's platform, and much more about personal integrity and trust. And if I had to choose any of those candidates who has more personal integrity and trust, or the most rather, was Elliott, of course, by leaps and bounds. And Ford, you know, I don't know about his ideas. He was largely not focusing on ideas, much like the other candidates. But on a trust level, it's just not there for me with him. And I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm not optimistic about him. If he can impress me, he can impress me. I'm not counting on it though. I'm counting on another Mike Harris, which is I think I've mentioned this before. My least favorite PC premier of Ontario, probably one of my least favorite premiers of Ontario in total. And that's not to say I think he had no good ideas, but in general, I think he was not.
I think I'm concerned for Doug Ford being in charge of like the PCs now, because like it was more because of like the recasting, the reballoting issue, because they weren't even sure if he actually won, right?
Yeah.
They confirmed it though that like he did win. Yeah. I think my concern also was I was also trying to explain it to someone else. Because like I think were they using a preferred ballot system instead of just first
preferential ballot? Yeah.
Preferential ballot.
You ranked them, and then whoever got eliminated there.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, if people like, so then Doug Ford had the most like probably first place votes. Then that's how it worked. Then, or then Doug Ford had a significant.
It was like points.
Yeah.
Like provincial points or something like that.
Yeah. It just sounds so complicated, and it just. But I don't know. I feel like people are just scared that he's going to be Trump light, and I feel like that's that's not like a very good claim to make towards Doug Ford. He's not really like that.
So to speak on that, I heard that a lot during
when people were trying to interview him. They were like, "Oh, do people view you as the Trump of Ontario?"
And I mean, as many criticisms as I have about Ford, I would not really compare him to Trump. Comparing him to Trump would be, I mean, obviously there's comparisons, but it's not, there's not, and there's a million politicians who you could compare to Trump if you were to compare Ford to Trump. I think as far as the similarities go, is they both have a very populist kind of partiality, and they both have kind of a informal cadence as far as politicians go. People seem to be making him out to be this like huge offensive, like controversial guy, and I just don't think that's the case. There's a lot I don't like about him, and that's just not one of the things.
He's proposing some good ideas, and like he's just bouncing off of like Patrick Brown's platform, which isn't a bad platform either. So I just can't wait to see what happens, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm getting so sick and tired of politics moving away from a debate about ideas and more
about people.
About people. This is so ridiculous.
You're electing the representative, but not the policies they're representing.
It's so stupid. Like, I haven't heard anything about Doug Ford's platform other than repealing the the sex ed curriculum at in public schools, and not believing in the carbon tax. But that was
he also mentioned that he doesn't want the government to be in charge of weed.
Yeah, he wants a free market for that too.
Yeah, okay. But those are all things that any conservative can rally behind, or even some liberals in a lot of ways. Not the sex ed part, but the free market for weed and whatever. It's just like he was like, "Oh, Kathleen Wynne, your days are numbered," and all I've heard is like, Kathleen, like, this is why I'm better than Kathleen Wynne. This is how I can beat Kathleen Wynne. Yeah. But you're not actually saying anything. Words are coming out of your mouth, but you're not actually saying anything. And this is sort of the beginning of what Marshall mentioned as his sort of populist platform. He's rallying the socially conservative immigrants are in Toronto and the GTA. He's rallying the disenfranchised Niagara Region conservatives, the Northern Ontarians.
Everyone that's voted for Rob Ford potentially previously.
Yeah,
like
the idea he's the legacy
Nation.
of Rob Ford.
Yeah.
The people's premier. He wants to be the people's premier, and I think he's going to win. I'm gonna call it from now.
And it's also like a lot of
That's
people
a
are
hot
saying
take for today.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it because every poll has polled in favor of the Conservatives post his nomination and before his nomination.
I personally think Kathleen Wynne does his campaigning for him.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, which is really bad.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people have said that it's going to be very Trump-style win. Like, people hate her more than they hate him.
Yeah, and I'm so sick and tired of this. It was fun to watch from here in the States being like, haha, sucks to suck.
When it affects our own
But it affects our own, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I was planning on voting green in protest. I told a few people this, but I'm going to tell the world publicly I was planning on voting green in protest.
Hot take.
And now I don't know what to do. I don't want to vote for Kathleen Wynne, but I do not want Doug Ford as premier. And Andrea Horwath has shown me nothing.
Man, I'm just
Rhinoceros Party.
I'm just gonna keep saying it again. Jagmeet is dumb for going into federal. You should just went in Ontario, and maybe you could have got something there.
Yeah.
I just feel like that could have.
I don't see.
I just feel like he also has that kind of like people. He doesn't have the same like people's premier quality that Doug Ford has.
But no, I know what you're talking about.
But he has
I
feel like he has the ability to
rather
garner more
popular.
votes
Yeah.
in this in this place instead of like in the whole country, right? So
yeah.
So,
I don't know.
great discussion. We might actually do an entire episode on Doug Ford, but
Dougie.
right now,
Dougie.
let's move on to our
Dougie. folks.
our main story of the week, which is what the fuck is taxes? Today we've got a new installment in our What the Fuck series, this time taxes and tariffs. So I also want to shout out to Kayla, my friend, who misread the title and thought it was What the Fuck is Texas. It's
What is
not.
Texas?
We could do a show on that too. But today we're doing What the Fuck is Taxes. You good, bro?
I have bronchitis. Excuse me.
My condolences.
Thank you.
Anyway, a tax as defined by the Oxford Dictionary is let me just turn that on. There we go. Is a compulsory contribution to state revenue levied by the government on workers' income and business profits or added to the cost of some goods and services like HST and GST and transactions. On today's show, we tell you everything you wanted to know in high school, aka what the fuck are taxes, because you don't learn that in high school, and why you should care about how much you pay. Touching on Canada-U.S. relations and the wealthy 1%, this show will definitely be terrific.
Hey-o.
It's the second time I made that joke, but we deleted the other episode, so it's cool.
all
It's as
good.
if it's the first time.
You could have gotten away with that. You could have
Yeah.
been like, this is the first time
I
I'm
know.
making that joke.
I like being honest.
Okay.
That's what.
Honest.
So what's the
Honesty.
first question?
So again, before we start, we are live on Facebook, so you can comment on our feed and have your thoughts read live on air. Let's begin. I asked this question and it was a bit too broad, but what taxes do we currently pay and what percentage? Let's talk about the biggest things that are taxed.
Okay.
For example, like income taxes and goods and services taxes like HST, GST. Let's talk about that. So what do we pay and what's the percentage?
Well, as students, unless we're making a very large amount of money, we don't actually pay that many taxes. On the income that most students would make, you would pay about 15% tax, and then most of that would be given to you in a rebate in April, because you're in school and it's just not fair for students to pay taxes. But there is actual legal language behind that. It's not fair.
Yeah, we don't need to get into the
Yeah,
nitty-gritty
exactly.
thing.
When you go to buy something, on most things you pay the
13%,
HST, the 13% tax. It used to be GST and PST, but Dalton McGuilty harmonized it. There are some things you don't pay taxes on, like bread, eggs, milk, cheese, butter, things like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
for the
water
longest
you don't
time.
pay tax on.
My buddy told me like it was like groceries specifically,
Yeah.
just because they're produce and that because they expire quickly, that's
Yeah.
like one of the rationale for not taxing it.
It's also a necessity,
It's
isn't
staple
it?
Yeah.
foods. Yeah, it's a
That's
necessity.
what I think that was the
Also,
correct wording for it.
I don't think you pay taxes if you're buying fast food less than something like $3. Like if you buy a
Really?
coffee, you don't pay tax on it.
Really?
Like a Tim Hortons coffee.
Because
not
I
a
always pay
Starbucks
tax
coffee.
on that.
That makes sense. But
If
it
something
would make
like
sense
that.
if it'd be like under 3 because usually if I get something from McDonald's, it'd be like a coffee and a McDouble or something
Yeah.
like that, and then you do get taxed
Yeah.
on that. So yeah.
And then you pay the eco tax, which is like 10 cents on a pack of batteries or different electronics that you buy.
And so, of course, one important aspect of taxes is why you pay them and why they're implemented, right? And so you've got taxes that are implemented to discourage certain behavior, or you've got taxes such as smoking, carbon taxes, alcohol, and it's not to say that you can't do those things. The government's not saying not to do those things, but it's implemented in a way that makes it less feasible to go overboard, right?
It's more like supposed to make you think about like, the choices that you're making.
And so the
then,
eco
right?
tax is another one. It's
Yeah.
if you're buying things that are just bad for the environment in general, then adding a tax
Like, an
is
example-
one of the government's ways of preventing the damage, right?
Right, because I think last year they also implemented like I feel like they do it like almost every year, like every 2 years or something. But like they increased the tariffs for alcohol and tobacco, and like their rationale behind it is like, to protect Canadian society, right? Because like if you know that like Canadian society is going to be like invested and they're going to be using all of these products, and if we're gonna, we might as well take that vice and try to turn it into something positive, into a revenue stream, right? Which makes sense. So it's not like it's not illogical. I mean, there's some like I can get pretty pissed about taxes, like not yet because we're not paying them, but like I feel like there's always that idea like you're liberal until you start paying taxes, and then that's when you become conservative. That's like a commonly said phrase, I believe. Or
I've never heard that personally.
Well, it's I think that's something that I've told you that I just
maybe
it's
maybe
just
I
something
just stole it from Marshall.
I think it's just something I said. Is
I mean, I
that
feel like,
you know every man's first paycheck is a test, and if he doesn't become a conservative immediately after receiving his first paycheck and seeing how much tax is taken off, then he's failed that test.
That's why I like cash.
And I mean, my attitudes on taxation may have shifted a little bit since I said that probably a year or two ago now, because I had my first full-time job, I guess 2 years ago, yeah. And I remember seeing how much I was getting taken off my paycheck, and I wasn't getting it back because I did do my taxes wrong. And so that's something that's very important. Do your taxes right, and it might save you a bit of frustration, a bit of political political ideology shifting as well. But you know what? I think that is a problem. That how I don't know how to do my taxes, and where was I supposed to get that information? I went up to somebody at my job, and I'm like, how do I fill this out?
And actually, CSER, which is the course union for continuing education students, they're actually doing a free tax clinic at Ryerson, which is very nice of them. But in terms of questions on taxes, you mentioned, Adam, the carbon tax. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about what that is? Because it's a very, very highly discussed issue in the news, and a lot of people, like myself, don't necessarily know too much about it.
Okay, so I don't know the actual statistics, but what the federal Liberals are planning to implement, if they haven't implemented already, I don't know that as well. They have. So it's a tax on the amount of carbon produced by the industrial sector and factories and things like that, and I think it's like it's a tax levy on per ton of carbon produced. So carbon, it's what goes through the smokestacks into the air, contributes to the greenhouse gases, makes for, we lose more of the ozone layer, more of the sun's rays get onto the earth, heats our temperatures, melts our icebergs, makes our world descend into chaos. So I think that what after the Paris Accords and part of the Liberals' platform was to implement a carbon tax. Now, the issue with the carbon tax in many ways is that one, factories will just up and leave and go elsewhere, because if they don't want to pay this tax, so it can greatly affect the factory sector of the Canadian economy and factory jobs, factory families, and it can also it might not be as productive, because if they just leave and produce carbon elsewhere, then they're just going to produce more because they can get away with it in other countries. And or they'll just get around it and they won't pay it. There are so many taxes that companies evade through offshore accounts, Swiss bank accounts, different things like that.
Right.
So what it has become, it's become this sort of this scapegoat to hate the Liberals in a lot of ways. It's like, oh, look at what they're doing. They're ruining the factory sector. Yes, but also they're trying to help the greater good in a lot of ways, but I don't think it's working. I think it's just become another thing to hate Justin Trudeau for, besides, his trip to India and different things like that.
Right.
So I think that the carbon tax has become a political issue. It hasn't become an environment issue, and it hasn't become a tax revenue source. The federal government is always looking for revenue sources. They're always looking for things to tax on. If they can tax it, there's a quote, something about, if it's something, then you can tax it, or something like that. So they're always looking to tax everything. I know I sound like a huge libertarian, but they really are looking to tax as much as they can. So I think this is just another way to tax it. I don't think this will help the environment much at all.
So we have a comment, and before I read that, I just want to make a correction to what I said. The federal carbon tax has not been implemented. There was an agreement in 2016 between the provinces to implement carbon taxes. Not all provinces have. The federal government is planning a federal carbon tax, though. So we have a comment from Sam that says, here's a hot take. Global temperatures rising will only make more of Canada more arable. Really makes me think. And
He's not wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
He's not wrong.
that's absolutely a good point. That is something that I've heard people.
Wait, can you say it again? Sorry, I was fixing something.
Global temperatures rising will only make more of Canada more arable.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, it's true. And I think that does global temperature rising benefit Canada in some ways? Yeah, for sure. But I think that there's also concerns to be addressed with that. Do I particularly care about, LA being unlivable? No, I don't really care about that. But I do think that looking at situations with polar ice caps melting, we do have quite a bit of polar ice in Canada. I think we probably have more than any other country.
Well, Denmark, if you count Greenland.
Well, if you count Greenland, yeah. And we do have various climates in Canada. And so if we end up with a California-esque climate in Ontario and in South Quebec, I suppose, and in the general south of the country, you know what? Fine, that'll probably be nice. But then the north of us, they shift, obviously, because it doesn't just affect the south of us, and there's all sorts of climate disruption that can happen as a result of that, all sorts of ecological
disaster,
chaos. And I do think that preserving our country, our nation's natural beauty and its natural resources, which would, of course, be affected by climate change, is very important. At the same time, I do think that there is a bit of going overboard that happens. And I think that there is some agenda setting that happens with climate change. And that's not to say that agendas can't be set to minimize the impact of climate change. But I do think that there is a problem to, I suppose, dishonestly use it to say climate change is coming and it's going to kill you. And if you don't elect us, then you're screwed. You're dead. I think that's kind of something that we see sometimes, and it is a problem. But I would never say that reacting to climate change and proactively acting to preserve our country's climate and our the actual country itself physically is. I think that's a good thing. I know it's a good thing, and it's very important.
And so the carbon tax itself, just a small thing on it. What's the tax percentage that's taxed on it, and where does that money go?
I pulled it up right now. Actually, I found it. Depending on the provinces, they've already done their own thing. But right here, most of the provinces, they're going to be doing a minimum of $10 per ton of carbon in 2018, and it's going to rise $10 every year all the way up to 2022. And if your province has not created their own carbon tax initiative, then the proposed federal one will apply to you, which would just be $10 per carbon, basically 2 to 3 cents per either gasoline, diesel, or propane and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's gonna create on that aspect, it could potentially, I don't know if that's going to affect only companies or if it would also have an effect on the households.
Yeah.
So it says here that it would, but I want to see its potential economic effects. How is that going to make people have a lower quality of life for being taxed like that?
I consider myself very environmentally friendly. I would like to be more environmentally friendly. If I had not lived in a building, it would be much easier to compost and recycle, even though I still try and do my best anyway.
It's not that difficult either.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
But the thing with me is that, okay, you see that gas would go up, 2-3 cents, you said? An environmentally, and my parents did this because they have the means to do so, but an environmentally friendly central heating and air conditioning costs around $10,000 to put in your house. Right. And it pays for itself in something like 10 or 15 years in how much you save on energy. So in the long term, and if you have the means to do so, I would encourage you to do so. But a lot of families would just take the 2-3 cent increase per whatever kilowatt usage or however much they would implement it to be, because they don't have the 10-15 grand to replace their entire central heating system.
But as a response to that, the Ontario government has been trying to subsidize those
Oh no, it would be much more expensive had it not been subsidized.
Yeah.
But still, this is what I'm saying. And I know that
there's more ways to reduce our carbon emission, like our carbon
Yeah.
footprint, than just carbon stuff, like
Yeah.
than just gasoline and stuff.
And I know that throughout the next decade or so, green tech will become cheaper. It will become more widely available. I have a family friend who works in real estate, and he was telling me that all of those housing developments that you see in the suburbs are now being built to fit solar panels, whether or not regardless they're installed. So there are ways to do it, but this is not the right way to do it. And factories will up and leave. It will happen.
Yeah. And so that is the thing. And
Yeah.
like, I don't want people to get the idea that I'm downplaying the importance of protecting the environment. It is extremely important to not disrupt the ecological equilibrium. And that doesn't mean that we have to punish the taxpayer. It doesn't mean that we have to punish the oil industry, the natural resource industry. I think that people have this idea that the oil industry is evil, and looking at the oil industry,
in a lot of ways it is.
I think looking at the oil industry globally, it certainly is a fair statement. If you look at it through Venezuela and some, I don't want to name any countries in Africa in particular because I'm not.
No.
Sudan has issues.
And the Gulf,
Canada has issues.
Canada has issues, of course, but to say that Canada is comparable to Sudan or the Gulf states or Venezuela, I think is quite the stretch. We have the most environmentally friendly oil in the world. We have the most ethical oil in the world. And I think supporting our oil industry and to boost it above those other oil industries is the best thing we can do, because it's not going away.
I disagree.
So then who would have more ethical oil then?
The Gulf. The Gulf has much more ethical oil in terms of how it can be taken out of the ground. The oil sands in Alberta are very dirty.
Yeah,
takes 2 tons of oil.
The fracking process is extremely damaging to the
it's
ecosystem.
millions of gallons of fresh water pumped into the ground, completely disrupting the groundwater process, infecting communities that are living nearby with the amounts of toxins in the air. And the effects of the oil sands can be found all the way into the Arctic Circle with the river systems and different things like that.
And so I just want to get a little back on track, but Marshall mentioned punishment, and you, Adam, mentioned L.A. And the reason
Marshall
I'm saying,
mentioned LA.
oh, you mentioned L.A. as well. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason that I bring this up is tax breaks.
Yeah.
Because we talked a lot about punishing the taxpayer. Now, what about tax breaks? What kind of tax breaks are available? How do tax breaks affect society and big corporations? And then I'm going to ask about tax breaks in terms of the film industry. That's why I said LA.
Oh, okay.
So, what kind of tax breaks are available to the general public? What kind of tax breaks are available to corporations? And how do these tax breaks help?
Well, it depends where you look.
Let's do like Canadian in Canada.
Well, that aspect, like federally, we can see I think it was called the Federal Action Plan. I think that was
Canada Action Plan?
The Canada Action Plan. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was like just showing all the new tax breaks that you had. So an example, like I forget. I won't know the names of these the names of the official tax breaks. I can't look them up. I'm just too lazy. But there's one that was like if you have a child, like you get a tax break.
Yeah.
If your child's in recreation and they're doing sports, you also get a tax break. If you have a child who's if you have like one of your sons or daughters that's in university, you also get a tax break.
If they're on residence as well.
If they're on residence, if they're buying textbooks, if they're buying food, like
If you buy a Metro Pass.
yeah, exactly.
And what constitutes a tax break, though? Like, what is it?
Well, the idea of the tax break would be like, because like you're like investing in your own money into the economy. Like, I am gonna sound I'm not well versed in this, but the idea would be like you're helping the fellow citizens by like giving them a break, right? I think that's one idea that's very like strong with Doug Ford. He likes the idea of tax breaks and stuff like that, just by helping the middle class because they're already having a significant struggle financially and stuff like that. It's the idea behind it.
Yeah,
Right?
and so we've got all sorts of tax breaks, many that Daniel mentioned, and I suppose the idea is that you have a certain expense and the government deems that expense to be for the greater good, and you're able to file that on your taxes and get a refund when tax season comes around, or a rebate, I suppose is the proper term.
April, yeah.
I think the biggest tax break that I know of that is sort of known by the general public is donating to charity. I think that
I don't think about that often.
yeah, no.
though.
If you donate more than $20 to charity, you get some
You
of
get
it
tax back,
in
right?
taxes. Yeah.
Same with donating to political parties.
Yeah, you get the $20, you get some of it back, or you get all of it back. I think at some point. And
in order to kind of subsidize all these tax breaks, in a sense, though, doesn't the government have to tax you more so that they can give you more back?
well, that's
Like,
the
how
whole
does that
thing.
work?
Like you know,
It's
you,
a give and
you-
take kind of
is it
thing.
a little-
You can
is
make
it
that
kind of just-
argument for a lot of things, like Canada's federal debt, something in the year of 2015 was 80 billion, and the amount of, or not federal debt, it was a figure of something. It was like deficit or something. I don't know. It was 80 billion. There was a number that was 80 billion, and the amount of money put into offshore bank accounts by rich corporate billionaires was 80 billion. So if they had paid taxes on that money, the deficit in Canada would be very well reduced. So you
Yeah.
can make that argument for a lot of things. Well, they might need to tax us more if they're giving us all these rebates.
Yeah.
Well, they're already taxing us a lot. And if corporations would pay what they're supposed to pay, maybe they would tax us less.
And
It always goes back to the idea of Bernie Sanders. Like, he just says it every single time. You gotta tax the 1% or like whatever. Like, it's the whole point about that is because they're making
Yeah.
so much money, right?
Yeah.
and
But,
now
like,
in terms of
it's wrong though. I don't know. I'll talk about it after, but go ahead.
But now, in terms of the wealthy 1%, should they be getting tax breaks? And if so, to what extent?
Well, they are.
Well, yeah, and I think that they're entitled to the same tax breaks as everybody else, so long as they have the same expenses that entitle other people to tax breaks. And
now wealth corporations are charged as regular people in terms of taxation, right? Or no?
Actually, Canada has a pretty fair corporate tax rate.
yeah, we have corporate tax, which is applied differently than income tax and individual capital gains tax.
Do you want to tell the viewers how? Really briefly
Do
if you can?
do I know the specifics of it? No, I'm sorry, I don't. But
Found out. Mark was caught.
you'd have to bring in an economics student for that. But we do have a different taxation system that applies to corporations based on their revenue.
Yeah.
As opposed to an individual's income or an individual's capital gains, the amount of capital gains they earn. And so you've got a lot of advocacy for increasing the taxes on the 1%. And I think that can be a problem. Should they be paying more taxes than somebody who earns $12,000 a year? Yeah, I mean, sure. But when it gets to a point where you're being taxed 48% of your income when you're making $200,000 a year, I do think that is a problem. And, you've got people who are making $200,000 a year because they're working very hard. And does every single person who makes that much make that much because they're a very hard worker? No. But to make that much, it's typically quite the undertaking. And I think that if we want to see people actually going through the effort of that undertaking to be making that much money, we can't be telling them, okay, now fork over half of it so we can spend it on ridiculous things. So we can spend it on a big rubber duck in Toronto port.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
It was
Harbor.
cute though. It was cute.
Did you go see it?
I saw it.
I didn't see
I
it.
didn't
I was
see it.
walking around there. I think I
No.
saw it for a quick minute.
And I think that, brings up an interesting point. And I don't care about taxes. I don't care about high taxes.
Hot take,
When they're
hot take,
ridiculous.
hot take.
On
When
an
they're
episode on tax. I don't care about taxes.
When they're okay, so it's
No, I know.
I'm
I know
not-
what you mean.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
didn't-
feel
yeah.
victimized by taxes. I feel victimized by what our taxes are used for. I think
Such
that,
as?
Well, I think that one thing that I really think is terribly, terribly unethical and corrupt for taxes to be used for is spending on things that benefit other countries and not us. I think that foreign aid, and it doesn't help. And this isn't me being,
I'll agree with that as well.
this
Go
isn't
ahead.
me being Scrooge McDuck hoarding my gold and no one else gets this. It doesn't help. And even Bono of all people came out recently. Okay, sorry everyone, I was wrong. It doesn't help. There's still kids dying at the snap of the finger in Africa every 60 seconds, but our foreign aid isn't doing anything about that. And I think a lot of places that are getting our foreign aid are abusing it. It's not because I'm saying they're bad people living in these places, but because of the situations that they're in are not helped by dumping money on the country.
Yeah, I feel like the problem with foreign aid, though, is because the money that we're giving, it's giving, like, unfortunately, due to a significant portion of those politicians are corrupt. So therefore, they're just going to take the money and they're not actually going to funnel it into the general people, which is the idea behind it. But then, like, I also disagree with foreign aid on the basis, like, when I was actually writing one of my first papers here at Ryerson, I talked about how foreign aid didn't work. I honestly thought it did work, but the more research I did, it showed that, like,
I wrote that paper too.
Yeah, did we write in the same topic? Yeah, the research I was using, I think from U of T, specifically showed that like by giving them like free clothes in that aspect of foreign aid and financial stuff, you're actually like reducing employment in those countries.
Undermines their economy.
Yeah, and it destroys their economy pretty much.
Yeah, I've read a lot of the same.
Because like, why would you want to work then if you're just going to get it for free by some white guy? Like,
no, I've read
Canada,
a lot of the like sort of clothing donations to Africa has killed their textile industry.
Yeah,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or the you know the shoes like Tom's shoes.
That
was my main like, idea behind the paper when I was using that. Yeah,
but I think that some countries like Palestine, Syria, some countries in East Asia,
very loose term for country.
Yeah, I know. There are countries that do benefit from our foreign aid, and if we're going to start talking about where our tax dollars are going and where they shouldn't be going and where they don't benefit sort of us or the Canadian people, I'm pretty okay with my tax dollars going to foreign aid. That's just me personally.
Wouldn't it be better though to like serve the interests of Canadians first before the interests?
No, but
of, like,
I don't think that the government gets our tax dollars and distributes it to foreign aid first. I don't think that's
of course.
how it works. I think that
sometimes I feel like that's the case.
I don't think that's the case at all, and I think
I just don't like this idea though that just because we're a Western country that's successful that we have to we have the moral obligation to send like a significant portion of our money and stuff like that.
We do have a moral obligation, I think, in a lot of ways to better humanity. Now, are there problems with foreign aid and the disbursement of foreign aid? For sure, 100%. And I think that conversation needs to be held on the topic of reforming foreign aid, not canceling foreign aid or stopping foreign aid.
Yeah.
I think that Canada pays a pretty fair dividend of foreign aid. I would like to see less go to some countries that are in states
would I be
of
comfortable
disarray.
with like a decent amount of money going to South Sudan, given like how like unstable the country is? No, I wouldn't want that. Obviously.
Any countries in mind, Adam, that you'd see less foreign aid go to?
You know what? I'm going to say it. I'm Pakistan. Pakistan is one of them.
Yeah.
No,
Pakistan is one of them. I know that Canada gives a lot of foreign aid to Pakistan.
Yeah, no,
I
agree.
don't think that's particularly fair. I think that the Pakistani government, along with many other governments, are corrupt. And I think that a lot of it doesn't go to the actual people in need.
Exactly.
To the poorer communities like the Balochistan people. And I don't want to quote anything, but I don't think that I think that's one country I have in mind. And I don't think that I know that that's a hot take, but that's definitely one that I have in mind.
And the last thing I want to talk about, which is still related to foreign relations, is the tariffs that the U.S. wants to impose on Canada, which is what I want to finish the show off with, because we were talking so much about foreign relations and foreign aid. Now we're talking the opposite of foreign aid. We're talking about a tariff war. And if anybody wants to take that, like, what are your thoughts?
I'll be the
that?
first to say, good for the U.S. They're putting their country first. They're saying, we are not going to be outsourcing our jobs. We're not going to be selling out our people because it's cheaper, because we want this arbitrary higher quality of life, because we need these luxuries, because we need all the best gadgets and gizmos to have a good life. And do I like it? No, because it negatively affects Canada. But I will say, good for them. That's, people don't realize prior to World War II, like 96% of the government's job was enforcing protectionism and tariffs and trade barriers, because that's what worked. And I really think if World War II went a different way, if it ended more poorly for Japan, we might not have. And I know there were nuclear bombs were dropped on them, and it doesn't seem like it can get any more worse than that. But it can, and I don't have time to explain that. I'm sorry. I know that's terribly vague, but and I think that this protectionism would still be very prevalent, and it's what many countries are founded upon is protecting your resources and your goods and your services, and not allowing them to be used as bargaining chips that sell out your country, especially a country like Canada where we have these strict labor laws, which I like. They're good. But it makes us a very, very weak player in the global trading game. And when we're, engaging in this free trade, we are just put at such a disadvantage, and we are completely held with an iron grip by the balls, by the U.S., who tells us, no, we can't label certain products as carcinogens because that's bad for U.S. business. And then they go ahead and sue us anyway. And it's absolutely insane that we're importing carcinogenic products that the Canadian consumer is consuming, and we aren't allowed to tell the Canadian consumer that they're carcinogenic. Carcinogenic, for those who don't know, means causes cancer. So we're giving products that cause cancer to Canadians and not telling them that they cause cancer because the U.S., Big Daddy America, says, no, you can't tell them because it's bad for our trade, and it's absolutely preposterous.
So then what do you think, like the tariffs, like the fact that they're imposing these tariffs, you think that's totally unfair? Or?
Here's my issue. I agree with a lot of what Marshall said, but a lot has changed since World War II, and the biggest change for that is NAFTA. Now, when the initial report came out, Canadians were like, this is a disaster, blah, blah, blah. But one report was talking about the Bush administration's reforms on steel that were put in 2002. Bush quoted at the time that this is going to help revitalize the steel industry in America, and they put a big tariff on imported steel. And the report that was issued in 2003 to report on the effects on the steel industry after the tariffs was that 49% of steel-consuming firms reported some difficulty in obtaining steel, 32% of manufacturers, including automakers, reported delays in production, 19% of firms passed along the price increases to customers, and the overall employment in the sector either fell or remained flat. So reforms don't work in terms of revitalizing the American steel production. We can prove this with the Bush administration reforms, and I don't think it's a good move for America, and it's generally not a good move for Canada. Canada will adjust if these tariffs go through. We'll find other markets to import our steel to, but I think that the American steel market is Canada's biggest buyer. So I think it's going to be an issue.
Now, it just occurred to me that Trump did exempt Canada from,
from
the tariffs.
and that's what I was going to follow up
So
with.
he
I
did?
think Trump realized that he exempted Canada, but he did not exempt Germany. He did not exempt many other countries in the EU that produce steel, and he did not exempt China.
That's going to be the main thing.
Yeah,
though.
that's the big one.
yeah.
That was a big issue in the U.S. election. Hillary Clinton was yelling during the debate.
And then
these
was
buildings
Mexi-
are built with
so
Chinese
Mexico
steel.
was
with
included
Chinese
there
steel.
too. Then was
I'm
I don't
not
know if
sure.
the
Mexico was exempted, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's the NAFTA countries that are exempted,
Of course, yeah.
which makes sense. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to explicitly say it, but
it just shows it just shows how important globalization is now, because
globalist.
yeah, exactly. There's just so much. Realizing that Canada and U.S. is such a huge trading partner together, they account for a significant portion of all imports and exports through each other, between both countries.
Mm-hmm.
It's just crazy that I feel like it would be important though, just because we are close, we share the closest border and stuff like that. We need to maintain a strong relationship.
Yeah.
But if Trump wants to damage those relationships with other countries and has the opportunity for Canada to step into those markets and generate more revenue, I'm all for it then.
Yeah, no, I agree with Marshall in saying that Canada should maintain its integrity and be a real sort of economic powerhouse and not be sort of the U.S.'s bitch. But I think that there are
Yeah, we need to have our own identity.
we
with that kind of stuff.
need that, and I like that. That's what I would agree with you on.
But
And-
it's really been vilified to be our own country. It's just
No, I agree.
Great. Yeah, I agree, and I think that the U.S. should really take care of Canada because we are huge trading partners, and it doesn't help anybody if you piss off Canada.
Yeah.
We're so nice as it is, so just don't impose tariffs on us because we don't really have much other places to go. But that's where we're gonna end the show. Thank you to everybody that tuned in and that messaged us live. A brand new episode of the Raben Report will be coming to you next week, same day, same time, same people. Have a great day, everyone.